Uri Pack is on tonight.
I think that President Obama is behind it because his people are certainly behind it. Some of the leaks possibly come from that group.
President Trump talking about leaks, but tonight he will talk about his vision for the country in front of Congress. Talking Points has plenty to say about that.
There was not a federal criminal warrant for the arrest of this individual. He may have had a previous conviction, but that is very different than a federal criminal warrant.
The governor of Washington State not supporting his own police for enforcing the law. You will not believe this story. Also ahead, Dana Perino on how presidential speeches are written, and Gutfeld and McGurk on the alternative universe they live in. Caution, you're about to enter the no spin zone. Factor begins right now. I'm Bill O'Reilly. Thanks for watching us tonight. About 1 hour from now, President Trump will deliver his first address before Congress, laying out his vision for the country. No matter what he says, though, some Americans, including many in the press, will oppose. But it doesn't really matter, as economics will determine the success or failure of the Trump administration. The big question tonight, what is the real state of the union? And that is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. The economy is getting stronger, but wages are still rather stagnant. A tax cut for working Americans might change that, as consumers would likely increase spending, leading business to expand. The more labor needed in the marketplace, the higher wages will go. If President Trump announces a big expansion of the infrastructure, construction projects, that'll stimulate the market as well. So across-the-board tax cuts and spending on roads, etc., is what is needed right now. Of course, that will drive up the national debt, which we'll get to shortly. On the national security front, the President's committed to building up the military, which is necessary, but must be done methodically. Mr. Trump's essentially correct when he says the USA has squandered about $6 trillion in the Middle East. I mean, what have we achieved there? ISIS and other jihadists still a major threat. Millions of refugees now need care. Iran remains a huge enemy. Iraq and Afghanistan are chaotic. Two presidents tried and failed to bring stability to the Middle East, using American blood and treasure. The goal was noble, the plans flawed, to say the least. Truth is, President Bush's confrontation and President Obama's retreat did not make things better in that brutal region. Can Donald Trump do better? No one knows. Also on the security front, there will be a partial wall on the southern border, plus increased enforcement of immigration law. The wall is largely a symbol, the enforcement a message. The Trump administration will not accept open borders and violators of federal law. As with the Middle East, immigration policy must be enforced methodically, with explanations given to the American people about why things are happening. The open border sanctuary city folks have the media with them. So to counter that, the president has to explain how his policy benefits the entire country. He should also be humane in this area. Desperate, hardworking people do not deserve harsh punishment. Thus, Congress needs to get off its collective butt and pass updated immigration laws. The issue is so intense that at tonight's speech, some Democrats are bringing undocumented folks as guests, while President Trump has invited families whose loved ones were killed by illegal alien criminals. Now, after immigration, the economy, and security terrorism, the problems get smaller except for the debt. It will continue to rise well past $20 trillion. Can you believe it? Until health care and Social Security spending are redefined. Donald Trump knows he has to run up even more debt to accomplish his agenda. And cutting some programs is not going to balance things out. President hoping that prosperity will eventually bring in more tax money, but that's far down the road. Eventually, in order to bring down the massive debt, the government will have to restructure Social Security and Medicare payments for younger Americans. Cutoff date will be 40-45. But Mr. Trump wants no part of that. Finally, if Donald Trump is successful in juicing wages, the culture war stuff will begin to go his way. Socialists like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren will be crushed if capitalism makes a comeback, and so will many of the nanny state proponents. Americans are tired of political correctness and left-wing totalitarianism. Most of us have had it with extremism on both sides. Truth is that this country remains a citadel of opportunity and common sense views held by regular folks. But that profile has been smothered by big government zealots, ideological fanatics, and a media that promotes the PC culture. If President Trump's vision brings increased prosperity and security, he will trounce his enemies. If economic opportunity rises in America, all the class warfare BS will be harder to sell. But in order for that to happen, America needs to be unleashed. And that's the memo. Now for the top story reaction, joining us from Washington, Lisa Booth and Juan Williams. So why did I leave anything out that the president should address tonight?
Well, before I say that, let me just say, Bill, you know what? I don't say this to you enough, but you got a heart. I mean, the idea that you would embrace significant immigration reform for hard-working people, humane immigration reform, to use your language, I think that's terrific. Push Trump away from damning these people as all rapists and murderers. I just think that's so unfair.
Well, he hasn't done that.
But when
you just delved into the propaganda machine.
Oh, stop. Anyway, listen,
Wait, Juan, listen to me. Do you think that saying on worldwide television that Donald Trump has demonized all illegal aliens as vicious criminals, do you think you saying that does you any good?
I wasn't concerned about me. I'm concerned about the fear,
I mean, do you think that that statement
out there that
totally false does you any good?
I don't think it's false. Oh, wait a second.
You think that Donald Trump, the President of the United States, has called every illegal alien in this country a heinous criminal? That's what you think?
He said, no, he has based the characterization of immigrants in this country when he came down that escalator last year, if you'll recall, the start of his campaign. He said they're not sending us our best, they're sending us
Is there anything I left out of the memo that he should address
thieves.
tonight, Juan?
No, okay, let me just tell you what I think you left out, Bill, which is I think, where's all this money coming from? You talked about infrastructure. Remember, not one Republican voted for infrastructure stimulus package.
Going to run up the debt.
Yeah, because he's going to say we're going to make all this money. I don't know where all this money's coming from.
So you would rather pass on infrastructure and military spending and keep the way it is?
No. Military spending, tax reform. He wants to cut services to the poor, to the elderly in our country. That's tough. I can't agree with that unless you tell me here's where the money's coming from.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Bill, I think the most important thing you said is regarding the economy, because everything else becomes noise. What Juan is saying right now, he just becomes noise. If President Trump can succeed on economic growth and getting people back to work, that is what he's promised, and that is what he needs to deliver.
All right, so that's all you should talk about tonight, Lisa?
No, but that is the most important thing that he can talk about, Bill, because the reason being is the audience he has tonight, those are the stakeholders. He needs those members of Congress to achieve that economic success, whether it's Obamacare or tax reform. So he has a captive audience tonight to those individuals. He also has an unfiltered line to the American people that he also needs to convince of that agenda.
He's not going to persuade Democrats to support him. They're not going to support him. He's got enough votes in the House and Senate to get what he wants through. All right, let's talk about tone. I think it would be better, Juan, for the president to show a little sense of humor tonight, maybe a little self-deprecation, try to sell himself not to the pinheads in Congress, because, again, that's going to be partisan lines all the way through, but to the folks. He needs 10% more of the American people to get on board with him. Got about 45% now. He needs 55%. So I think that maybe he'd be the warm kind of guy tonight. That would help him, no?
That's good advice. No, that's legit advice. I mean, look, his poll numbers are down, 40, 45. I mean, he's the least popular president after a month that we've seen in the modern era.
Yeah, but that's because he's blowing up the swamp. You know that.
Well, I think that he is creating anxiety and nervousness even among people who may have voted for him, Bill.
Are you nervous? I'm not nervous. I mean, I think he's doing exactly what he said he was going to do. I don't see anything he's doing that he didn't say he was going to do.
I saw a poll the other day. It said like 66% of Americans think he could start a war any minute. So, I mean, that's nervousness.
But those are the people watching The Walking Dead. They think zombies are coming any day. Are you nervous, Lisa? Are you frightened? Because if you are, I'm going to, we'll get somebody down there to help you.
I'm not, but I disagree with you that President Trump has the numbers to get the things done that he needs to get done. I disagree with that point. I don't think he does. And right now there's been this perception that is being driven by both the left and the media that President Trump is not in control, that this job is too big for him, that he is not prepared for this job.
But he has a majority in the House and in the Senate.
But he only has 52. Yeah. There's limitations in that number of what he can get done. So, and I also don't think that he necessarily has all the Republican support, even among those 52
well, he's got to
senators.
persuade his own party, but it looks like he's pretty much in sync with the party leadership at this point.
But Bill, the point I was going to make earlier is the fact when you're talking about tone, what is important tonight for President Trump to project is that confidence of that leadership and the fact that he is ready for this job, he is driving the ship, and he is going to get those things accomplished because he does need to convince not only members of the Republican Party, but vulnerable senators as well.
Lisa, with confidence. I don't think Donald Trump really got a problem with that. But he can either be tough guy Trump tonight or he can be nice guy. I think he ought to lean a little into the nice guy tonight, but we'll see.
I like the nice guy, but I want to see him do what you talked about, redefine Social Security, redefines health care. I don't see him doing it. No, that was in the memo. That's a little much.
I'll suggest he comes to your house and just do that with you. Next on the rundown, what should President Trump's tone be tonight? We'll continue that discussion. Then later, why is the governor of Washington State allowing his own police to be investigated over treatment of criminal illegal aliens? This is a shocking story. Factors coming right back. Continuing now with our lead story, President Trump's speech before Congress in just a few moments. It's coming up. Joining us from Nashville, Tennessee, John Meacham, presidential historian, author of the book Destiny and Power about President Bush the Elder. So first of all, did I leave anything out of the talking points that Mr. Trump should address tonight?
I think one thing that he could say, and it may or may not do any good, it probably won't, but why not get the points for doing it, is saying, look, we're all Americans. He needs to, I think, put himself in the presidential tradition, began with Jefferson, runs through Reagan, of a kind of big-hearted, optimistic vision for the country. And I think his supporters would say he has that. Many of his opponents, however, fervently believe, as you know, that he doesn't share that view.
So you think he should try to persuade everybody to give him a chance? Doesn't that look a little weak if he does that?
How does you're president of the United States. You're not going to look weak if you make an assertion of Americanism, of national identity. It actually flows from his basic worldview. I mean, why not argue that the people who are out protesting me are as American as I am, and my job as your president is to convince enough of you that what I want to do to make America great again is the right way to go.
All right, so you would be conciliatory toward his opponents. I think you could take that up to a certain level, but there are haters out there.
Sure.
You know, and I don't, if I were him, I'd stay away from the press tonight. It's not the right forum to go after the press. The fake news thing, not in front of Congress. Now, but let's be honest here. I don't think that whatever he says is going to persuade any Democrats to support him. I mean, it's a really polarized Capitol right now.
It absolutely is, but that's why you might get some points, and it's not going to hurt, you know. I don't think it's going to make you look weak. He's got a strong base in the House. He's got 52 senators who are going to be with him certainly right now and going forward. So I don't see
I didn't get Lisa's contention he didn't have the votes. He does have the votes to get most of the stuff done. I think he'll get the Supreme Court justice in. Judge Gorsuch, and I think that at this point he's got to get 10% more of the votes. See, when he speaks, again, I wouldn't be speaking to the Republicans or Democrats. I'd be, again, using this to talk to the folks. You've got to get it up to about 52, 55 job approval. It's doable. I mean, you don't have that many people hating him.
Well, and there's also, you know, it's a diminishing center, right? So there, as you say, there aren't that many people there. Is it 10%? Is it 12%? But I think that what a lot of folks worry about is that he's too pugilistic. He's too quick to punch back. And I take the point that he's punching back as opposed to unilaterally punching on the front end. But I think the tweets worry people. I think the fake news stuff worries people. And I think that, you're not going to get any Democrats, but he's got, 85% or more of Republicans. He's got a strong base there.
Yeah, he's got
enough oxygen to reach out.
But let me take issue for a moment. He got elected being pugilistic, verbally pugilistic. Sure. He got elected. And his base wants him to lash out at the people who not only hate him, but they hate anyone who supported him. See, that's the difference. I didn't dislike President Obama when he got into office or even when he left. And I certainly didn't dislike the people who voted for him. But now they do. They think these Trumpians, people who supported Donald Trump, are like the basket of deplorables that Hillary Clinton described. And so that there's a real anger on the part of Trump supporters. They don't want him to be too mellow. He gets too mellow, they're not going to like that.
I'm not suggesting you walk over to Nancy Pelosi and sing Kumbaya, which I think is unlikely tonight. What I am suggesting is that historically speaking, and you know this, great presidents don't simply govern for their base. They govern for the base plus. You look at Ronald Reagan, who came in, we think of the 1980 election as a big landslide because it ended early that night. As you know, it was, he grew that number to the 49 states.
84 was the big landslide.
49 states.
Right.
And he did it by convincing a lot of people that he was not, as he himself once put
That's
it,
a very
combination of the Mad Bomber and Ebenezer Scrooge.
That I think Donald Trump would be very wise to follow the arc of Ronald Reagan, who had a rough 2 years, obviously shot. And then he was able, by mostly his presence, mostly his personality, and the improving economy, but it didn't shake off until the second term, to get 49 states. Because people said, you know what, this guy looks like he's looking out for me. So Trump would be smart to look at that. Hey, John, always a pleasure. Thank you for coming on. Directly ahead, Dana Perino, on how these presidential speeches are put together. Are there 80 people writing them? Then a shocking situation in Washington State. The governor there supporting an investigation of his own police for enforcing the law. Those reports after these. Personal Story segment tonight, President Trump's address will involve a number of writers, including Mr. Trump. Question, how is the speech put together? Joining us from Washington, Dana Perino. So, your former boss, President Bush the Younger, how many speechwriters would do a State of the Union, for example, for him?
Well, you'd have the lead speechwriter. In President Trump's case, that is Steve Miller. But you'd have your speechwriter, and then he'd have like a team of 2 or 3 people. And they would usually, at least in our administration, they would break up the speech into 3 basic areas: foreign policy, domestic policy, and then sort of your miscellaneous, maybe social policies, things like that. Then junior aides would write a rough draft, and then they would cobble it together. Now, one of the things President Bush very much wanted for his speeches to be logical, to be easily explained, and so the themes all had to fit together. And then they would take it to him. He had a very heavy pen. He was a heavy editor. And then they would go back, and he'd like to keep things pretty short. I think a 45-minute speech for him was long. And then after that was all done, you then have the parade of cabinet officials that wanted to come in and make sure that their pet project was in the speech.
Really?
That's the hardest thing to guard against.
President Bush would let them read the speech before he delivered it?
Not necessarily. Well, sometimes, yes, especially, for example, when Condoleezza Rice was the Secretary of State and it was a heavy, let's say we're dealing with the Iraq War, it was heavily foreign policy oriented, she would definitely have a hand in that. But I don't think that they send out the speech to every cabinet agency, but they know, Bill, what is going to be in the speech based on the budget that they just got. So that happened this week for President Trump. He sent 2 days ago to the agencies their blueprint, said, this is what I'm going to offer you in your budgets for this year. Now, that tracks with the State of the Union or the joint session speech because your budget is your policy document. Okay.
Now, did you, as the press secretary, did you get a look at the speech? Did you have input into the speech?
Towards the end of the process, and, what I was looking for was what were the news items in the speech? what were the lines that I thought were going to get applause or laughter or memorable lines like the axis of evil, for example, because those were the news items that I knew I was either going to have to drive or talk about in the coming days.
So you got a peek at it. Now,
yes.
So for President Bush the Younger, there were about 4 people who crafted it, including himself, because he's editing and
right.
suggesting this, that, and the other thing. We assume it'll be the same for President Trump, right? I think President Obama had a few more people helping him do it. But the president doesn't sit there at the computer and knock it out himself. He doesn't do that.
No, we would all be so lucky to have that many type of great writers. The other thing that was my favorite part, Bill, is after it was sort of locked down and President Bush would make sure that that speech was finalized 48 hours before the speech, which meant nobody, it could have even been Condoleezza Rice, she could not get anything else in that speech. That was very different from Bill Clinton. 2 days before.
That's
and then practice in the family theater.
Okay, so the family theater in the White House. He's got a teleprompter. He's reading it. Were you there critiquing him and say, hey, come on, you know?
Yes.
Yeah, you were there. Who else?
Well, that was my favorite part. Really, one of my favorite parts of the job was to be there listening, because when you work with somebody as closely as a president, you know their voice. You know when they might pause. You know what applause lines are going to need a little bit more time to breathe. So you might suggest, Mr. President, you might pause there, let that sink in.
And how many people were there
I would have
watching
fun
it?
with that part.
How many people were there with you?
10 to 12.
They were watching him do it. And how many times would you run through it?
Well, so I would say probably 6 to 10.
I don't know if Trump has the patience for that. I don't know.
Well, and also, you know, they said the speech is going to be at least an hour and 5 minutes long, so it'd be a lot of practicing.
That's right. A lot of popcorn. I've got it. I've got the butter ready and iced tea.
Do you put Milk Duds in there and melt it all
around? No Milk Duds. I think that's an abomination.
Oh, right, that's sugar.
Popcorn should stay by itself. Milk Duds should stay in the other room. Dana Perino, everybody.
I don't know. I could try to convince you.
No. Plenty more added as Factor moves along this evening. Gutfeld McGurk will offer some suggestions on the State of the Union. We're not exactly sure why. But next, disturbing story out of Washington State. Police are being investigated there for upholding the law of the land. I hope you stay tuned for those reports. Immigration law enforcement and those who do not. In Washington, a state trooper who has not been publicly identified under investigation because he informed ICE about an illegal alien convicted felon. Fox News correspondent Dan Springer picks up the story.
It was a routine call for the Washington State Trooper, a collision here on Interstate 5 in Tacoma. One of the drivers involved was Armando Chavez. A standard check of his driver's license revealed a warning from Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Chavez was an illegal immigrant, convicted of felony drug trafficking, and deported 4 times between 1996 and 2000. The trooper called ICE, who arrested Chavez at the scene. He's now at the Immigration Detention Center awaiting deportation. And the trooper, who has not been identified, is under investigation by his own department for possibly violating policy.
Our troopers aren't federal immigration officials, and they're there to protect the roadways, to ensure everyone on the roadways are safe.
It's the new hypersensitive gray area in which the men and women in blue now find themselves working. Sanctuary cities and states seem to want no cooperation with ICE, upending a century-old police ethos.
The good guys, they feel like the bad guys because either they're not getting support from above or the people are not coming to their defense.
It's also happening in Multnomah County, Oregon. The Sheriff's Department is investigating a deputy who called ICE to let them know an illegal immigrant facing domestic violence charges would be showing up at the courthouse. Back in Washington State, the Democratic governor defends protecting undocumented criminals from deportation.
There was not a federal criminal warrant for the arrest of this individual. He may have had a previous conviction, but that is very different than a federal criminal warrant.
ICE usually doesn't issue arrest warrants because deportations are an administrative process, not something to tie up in criminal courts.
I'm concerned that this administrative investigation of this trooper will have a chilling effect, not just on this trooper, but on other troopers and other law enforcement personnel.
Dan Springer joins us from Seattle. If action's taken against this trooper, he could sue the state of Washington, he's just doing his job. I mean, this is the mandate from the President of the United States and in an executive order to remove criminal illegal aliens. So we really have a situation here that could get very intense.
Well, he was doing the same job that law enforcement officials across the country do every day. 1.4 million times in 2015, cops just like this trooper called into ICE and said, I got this person, I want to run his name.
But Inslee, the governor...
In 2015, over 112,000 ICE agents went out to scenes just like that in Tacoma and made arrests of these
But here's the problem. He works directly for Inslee, the governor, Inslee.
Inslee,
okay?
yeah.
The governor. And Inslee obviously doesn't want his state troopers informing ICE, even if there is a deportation order or a guy that's been convicted of a felony and defied deportation 4 times. He doesn't want it. This governor doesn't want it. And these guys work directly for him.
Yeah, Governor Inslee seems to be trying to make the distinction between an arrest warrant that comes from the federal government, and we will respond to those, but we will not respond to deportation requests or information requests or, hey, this guy has a bunch of convictions on his record, he's been deported, he's come back. They don't want the troopers to respond to those.
This is on a collision course now, this whole crazy stuff. And let us know what happens to this trooper. Because this is a fascinating story. Dan, thank you. When we come right back, Gutfeld and McGurk on how America is doing. Are we in trouble or are we on the rise? The boys are next.
Your favorite shows on Channel 114, plus every story, every 15 minutes. Fox News headlines 24/7, Channel 115. The O'Reilly Factor, the #1 cable news show for 16 years and counting.
Thanks for staying with us. And Bill O'Reilly in the What the Heck Just Happened segment tonight. What's really happening in the USA. Here now, Bernard McGurk and Greg Gutfeld. All right, Gutfeld, let's grade the country. Obviously, A is best. B is not. You give it?
I give it an A+. The United States gets an A+ because I grade on a curve. When you compare it to the other countries of the world is styrofoam. We are gold. A bad America beats a stellar France. That's why there's a line to get in, not a line to get out.
So an A+.
An A+. Our awfulness is preferable to the world's mediocrity.
I agree with him. I actually give it a B-.
B-.
B-. You have to maintain a perspective. Things are not that bad. I mean, we're not involved in a hot war anywhere, thousands of people dying. The crime rate is actually way down. There's food aplenty. I mean, the side effect of poverty is obesity. That's a good problem to have. And most liquor stores are open on Sunday.
That's so true.
So we're making a lot of progress here.
We're making a lot of
and pretty soon we'll have the pot shops. They'll be everywhere. They'll be open on Sunday, too. So we can all be intoxicated 7 days a week.
No, listen, we're divided politically, racially, you're right.
But that's what I want to get at. You know, you look at the country at this point in history, and you've got civil war. I mean, social civil war, Gutfeld. Have you noticed? I don't know.
I think it's healthy that people are taking it out on each other verbally and online, because what's happening is we're shifting away from violence. Violence is actually is reduced overall.
Right.
That's because we're being such jerks to each other online.
Right. So you put the switchblades away.
Yes.
So you can just knife people verbally.
You murder them. Yeah.
And this is progress to you.
I believe it is.
And you.
Yeah, right. And that he's right about the violence. It is just at this point, it's just verbal violence is what it is. And also on the downside, the real unemployment rate very high. But overall, Bill, look.
Well, it's not that high anymore. It's around 5%, 5.5%. But the jobs aren't great.
The mediocre.
You can't earn a lot of money, and that's what President Trump has to break out from. Is that
quality of life is fantastic for them. You could basically work at McDonald's and still buy a car at this point. Not an Escalade.
Not a good car.
Not an Escalade.
No. I job share with 4 other people.
Okay, so you're both, and I'm a little surprised here. You're both very bullish on the USA as it stands now, even with all the acrimony, which is a big word that I know you know, Bill.
Yes, yes.
He pays it too.
Yeah, that is true. I think in order to have a great country, you got to have a safe country, and I think that's tonight. I think the message should be security guarantees freedom. That's the
And
way
the
I
message
see it.
tonight for you?
It should be, he should stress his America First message is an inclusive message.
Inclusive.
Inclusive.
Yeah.
That black Americans, Latino Americans, Asian Americans, Muslim Americans, white Americans, Christians, Jews. It's an inclusive message. It's been distorted as to some sort of hateful sentiment. He should stress that fact. Somehow or other, he should get that across to the people.
And safe spaces for everyone, right?
No, just for little people like me.
Okay. What's the cutoff, 5'6"?
Yeah, about that. I just don't like the way you look at me in the halls, Bill.
Who? I can't see you in the hall.
I know.
I mean, I'm looking this way, and you're down there.
Keep placing things on my head.
All right. There they are, everybody. In a moment, a wild male segment. Right back with it. One History, One Thriller. In a moment, but first the mail. Jim Rogers, Niskayuna, New York. Bill, you were right on the mark about the town hall situation. Freedom of speech must include freedom to speak. David Kelly, Louisville, Kentucky. Hey, Bill, I don't recall you criticizing Tea Party people for interrupting and shouting down their opponents. It's because you don't want to recall that, Dave. You just don't want to. I hammered Tea Party people when they hectored Congressman John Lewis and when Congressman Joe Wilson was disrespectful to President Obama, just to name two. Mike Calcina, Chicago. Bill, you said it's war between the press and the president, but you are ignoring who started the war. He did. Julio Rivas, Berkeley, California. Mr. O'Reilly, you of all people shouldn't complain about demonstrators yelling at town halls. You yell at your guests regularly. Sure I do, Julio. You know, you're living in the right place. Never move. Brian Cahal. Huntington, New York. Mr. O, you said you understand why Donald Trump is not releasing his tax returns because the media would distort the situation. Completely ridiculous. I also said I want the president to release his returns for transparency reasons, Brian. But if you think the press would report the tax situation fairly, if you think that, say hello to the flying monkeys for me. It's a Wizard of Oz reference for those of you who have no idea that you're even living in America. Jeff Chadden, Washington, Indiana. Sure, sorry, President Trump hurt Iran's feelings with the travel ban. Maybe that Iranian director who didn't show up for the Oscars could lecture his leaders about saying death to America. That hurts my feelings. Me too. Right? Belinda Lynch, Wagga Wagga, Australia. The only thing wrong with the O'Reilly factor is that Mr. O is not keeping the Australian media in check. R.A. Malmendier, Folsom, California. Will Old School, Life in the Same Lane, be available in audio? You betcha, R.A., to quote Sarah Palin. I did some work on that today. Book and audio out March 28th. Zach Kozak, Parma, Ohio. Bill, I'm excited to read Old School. As a senior in high school, it'll be interesting to see how your generation compares to my own. Some pages may be grim on that front, Zach, but it's basically a funny book, so I hope you'll enjoy it. Sean Lindsay, Hillsboro, Oregon. Just finished Killing the Rising Sun. I shed a lot of tears. When I compare that generation to ours, I'm embarrassed. Finally tonight, the fact, the tip of the day, two books you might like. Dodge City by Tom Clavin is an interesting history of the West in the late 19th century. Focuses on Wyatt Earp, Bat Masterson, who were fast friends. What You Break by Reed Farrell Coleman, novel starring ex-cop Gus Murphy, quite a character, and Long Island based. Check them both out. Back to tip of the day. That is it for us tonight. Please check out the Fox News Factor website, which is different from BillO'Reilly.com. Also, we would like you to spout off about the Factor from anywhere in the world. O'Reilly at FoxNews.com, O'Reilly at FoxNews.com. Name and town if you wish to apply. Word today, do not be jejune when writing the Factor. Tomorrow, Vice President Pence, right here, as Bob Hope would say, right here. Again, thanks for watching us tonight. I'm Bill O'Reilly, and please remember that the spin stops here. We're definitely looking out for you. Now let's hand things over to Bret Baier and Martha MacCallum, warming up for the president's speech.
You are looking live inside the House chamber on Capitol Hill. We are just minutes away from President Trump's first address to a joint session of Congress. Good evening from Washington. I'm Bret Baier.
And I'm Martha MacCallum. President Trump set to deliver arguably the most important speech of his young presidency. We are told that he will lay out a, quote, optimistic vision for the renewal of the American spirit. That is the theme for the evening. He will focus on what he has called many times throughout the course of this campaign, the forgotten men and women of the country, and he will promise them that help is on the way.
Senior White House officials also promising a bold agenda: tax reform, defense spending, dismantling Obamacare, adding a replacement, infrastructure improvements, and now a new push, not only for border security and tightening that security, but also for a comprehensive immigration reform bill, as long as, according to the president, quote, there are compromises on both sides.
So here to take all of us through the evening as we watch, Fox News senior political analyst Brit Hume, Fox News Sunday anchor Chris Wallace, former White House press secretary and co-host of The Five, Dana Perino, also co-host of The Five and Fox News political analyst Juan Williams, and host of Tucker Carlson Tonight, Tucker Carlson.
As we look at the House floor there, Britt, these are always interesting moments where you have all of the different elements coming in that will come in before the president is announced. Some years you see the posting up along the aisle. We don't know if we'll see that. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, Elliot Engel from New York already said he's not going to do it.
No, and it doesn't look like very many of them are doing it at the moment, Brett. And I can't help but have sympathy tonight for the writer who has to do this speech. This is always a murderous speech to write for any presidential speechwriter, because you don't quite know whether to go for process and legislative detail or to try to reach for poetry. Many times presidents try to do a little of both. But think about us, all of us here who've covered so many of these. How many of us can really remember anything that was said in one of these addresses to Congress, whether it be a formal State of the Union address or one like this, which is simply a presidential speech to Congress? Hard to remember many of them.
We see some of the Democrats are wearing white tonight. We're told that that is their way of honoring the suffragette movement, and they are proclaiming that they will not be pushed backward in the March for Women. That is their way of expressing that tonight. Chris, your thoughts?
You know, I think we generally tend to overstate the importance of these speeches, as Brett indicated. Having said that, I think that this is a pretty important speech for Donald Trump for two reasons. One, because there's a lot of division on the Republican side about some of the main articles of his legislative agenda, talking specifically about Obamacare repeal and replace and tax reform. And I can tell you that Republicans in the House and the Senate are desperately looking for some guidance, not details about what clause and subparagraph, but general guiding principles about what the president wants to see, something that they can all get behind and that they know the president will protect them on. In addition to which, as we've seen, a president can do a lot by executive action, but there are limits to how much he can accomplish. We're seeing that now as President Trump undoes President Obama. So if the president's going to get some of this legislation through, he is going to need Democratic support on some of this. And up to this point, I think he's made it easy with a very sharp line for Democrats to say no. I think you're going to see an effort tonight to reach out to Democrats and say, let's work together on some things. Brett mentioned comprehensive immigration reform, infrastructure. I think those are subjects in which you might see an appeal for bipartisan cooperation.
As you look there at the House floor, you see Vice President Pence and the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan. They are friends. And there you see the announcement of the next group of people coming in, and those are the justices of the U.S. Supreme Court, and they will make their way to their seats. Dana, you've been through a lot of these. Not only as co-host of The Five analyzing it, but as a White House press secretary behind the scenes.
Well, America is energized, and whether they are hopeful or worried, tonight is the only night that President Trump will have a clean slate with Congress. One of his most important things that he's done so far is nominate Neil Gorsuch to be a Supreme Court justice. There you see Justice Roberts, and then I don't see Justice Alito, but two Supreme Court justices in President Bush's term. You will also see the two that President Obama put on the court. President Trump has the one, Gorsuch, and he probably will get another. And so I think that you'll hear a little bit of that tonight, because the Republicans and voters that came out for him really love that choice.
The one, Democrats have been pretty dug in the resist movement for the most part, but we do get the feeling that President Trump tonight is going to reach out in some way and kind of open the door to them. What are the areas that you think that there's possibility that they might meet him halfway on?
Well, this is sort of an interesting conundrum, Martha, because on infrastructure spending, for example, you'll recall, I think there were only 3 votes in the Senate back in 2009 for President Obama's stimulus package. I don't think there were any in the House. So now you come with something like an infrastructure spending deal, and you can anticipate that Democrats might say yes to it. The question is, what will Republicans, given their orthodoxy, say to that kind of stimulus coming from a Republican president? I think that's why tonight really is about the Republican brand. I think he can do some outreach to Democrats, but I think what he really has to do at this moment is to say, I'm here as a Republican to the Republicans in Congress, and try to keep them in line. He cannot afford defections. He has a Republican majority in the House, a Republican majority in the Senate. If he can enforce party rule, he can get some legislative accomplishments done, as Chris Wallace was talking about.
The Vice President and the Speaker getting the memo on the neon blue ties on the backdrop of the flag. We're waiting for the First Lady, Melania Trump, to be announced. She will be coming in.
And it'll be interesting to see which tie the president wears. He has that blue tie, but he usually wears a red tie on big occasions. So that's something to wait for.
There you go. Tucker, your thoughts?
That used to be the law, Brett. I think it's changed. Look, the president, there is a pretty large overlap between what he wants to do on policy and what Democrats have said for decades they would like to do. I think one of the lines he's going to deliver tonight is one he's delivered a lot in the last couple of months, which is we squandered billions abroad prosecuting foreign wars. We should have spent that money at home. How are Democrats going to respond to that? No, we're against that? I mean, I think that's one of his key audiences, is Democrats really agrees with. You know.
Let's listen into the House chamber as the First Lady walks in.
Melania Trump taking in her moment, the first time for her, as she comes into the chamber to watch her husband give this very important speech for him tonight. There's Ivanka Trump and Jared, her husband, Jared Kushner, who's a senior advisor to the president. So these people are getting used to Washington life and kind of getting used to a very new situation for all of them, everybody turning and applauding the family as they come in. We know that there are a number of guests that have joined them. Many of them are victims of immigrant violence in some cases. One is a person who has gone through a rare disease and is joining Melania Trump there as well. So she's had a little bit of a difficult initiation, but she's spending more and more time in Washington and says she plans to move here as soon as the school year is out.
This is interesting.
Mr. Speaker, the President's Cabinet.
Now, the President's Cabinet being announced there on the House floor, the problem is they're not all seated yet because they haven't been all confirmed by the U.S. Senate. There are still some cabinet members who have not come out there. You see the Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, behind him, Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, and behind him, Elaine Chao, the Transportation Secretary, also the wife of Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. Chris, we were at the White House today, lunch with the President, most of it off the record. Melania Trump, the First Lady, was there, came and greeted us. It was an interesting moment as this President and First Lady are kind of getting their legs about them as far as how to deal with this town.
No, that's right. And it was very interesting because we were all surprised. We fully expected the President for the lunch. We didn't expect Mrs. Trump to show up. And there has been this kind of narrative that she's uncomfortable as First Lady, uncomfortable in the White House. She couldn't have seemed more comfortable, more gracious, and after all of us crowded around to say hello to her, she went upstairs, said she had a lot of work to do on some events that she was planning at the White House. So I get the sense she's going to be much more engaged as a First Lady than some of us have been led to believe.
We should point out that the designated survivor is the VA Secretary, Shulkin. That is the person who is out of the chamber, out of the city, in case the worst possible thing happens. It's also a fun show, I believe.
Exactly. Takes on a whole new meaning. All right. As we prepare for this moment, we watch Paul Ryan and Vice President Mike Pence getting ready. So it is standing room only in the House chamber chamber tonight. We are just moments from President Donald Trump's first address. It is called a joint session of Congress tonight, not a State of the Union, because it's his first time as president. Good evening from Washington, everybody. I'm Martha McCallum.
And I'm Brett Baer. The president will soon be introduced by the Sergeant at Arms and make his way down the aisle in the House chamber to address lawmakers and, of course, the American people. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts is live on the North Lawn with what we can expect tonight. John.
And good evening to you, Brett. This is a logical progression from the inaugural address back on the 20th, the last time the president was up at the Capitol. There, he sort of laid out the broad theme. He set the table. Now he starts to fill in the blanks with a lot of broad policy proposals. And while he will be addressing lawmakers there in the chamber, he is actually going to be talking past them for most of the night to the American people, trying to sell them on his plans to reform immigration enforcement and casting that in terms of jobs. He'll say tonight, by finally enforcing our immigration laws, we will raise wages, help the unemployed, save billions of dollars, and make our communities safer for everyone. He'll talk about terrorism. He'll talk about health care, saying Obamacare is collapsing and we must act decisively to protect all Americans. Action is not a choice, it's a necessity. But he also will reach out to members of Congress because he needs them to get his legislative agenda through. We'll see if Democrats are willing to work with him because his programs are very popular, particularly among working folks. This could be the beginning, Brett, I hate to say it, of the 2020 campaign here tonight.
Oh, wait a second, John. That's too early. It's too early. Let's one thing at a time here. John, thank you very much. You look now at the First Lady in the box there in the House chamber, and we await the president to come from the holding room, and Paul Irving, the House Sergeant at Arms, will have that famous